As the train rattled along the tracks, as James slumped into his usual seat, exhausted from another long day at work. His life at 40 had become a monotonous cycle of deadlines and late nights. But that evening, fate intervened. She entered the carriage like a whisper of fresh air. Her presence was magnetic, a stunning woman with deep brown eyes and a warm smile. James felt an unfamiliar spark within him. She sat beside him, and for a moment, he struggled to find words. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice laced with kindness. James chuckled. "You could say that. But this meeting, you feels like the highlight." She laughed softly. "I'm Evelyn." They talked until the train reached James's stop. But in the midst of their laughter and conversation, neither of them exchanged contacts. As the doors closed behind him, James felt an odd pang of regret. Days passed, weeks. He convinced himself that it was a fleeting encounter until fate intervened again. At a coffee shop, as he waited for his order, he heard a familiar voice behind him. Turning, he found Evelyn staring at him in surprise. "Well, if this isn't fate playing matchmaker," she teased. This time, James didn't hesitate. They exchanged numbers, and so began a love story neither of them could have predicted. Months passed, and their love deepened. They were inseparable. Marriage followed, then children, a boy and a girl who became the center of their world. James had finally found his purpose, his happiness, but happiness has a cruel way of slipping away when least expected. One evening, after experiencing weeks of unexplainable pain, James was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The doctors were grim. His time was limited. He couldn't bear the thought of leaving Evelyn and the kids. The mere thought of them grieving his absence was unbearable. Then, a desperate, unimaginable solution presented itself: cloning. A controversial, secretive technology reserved only for the wealthiest. It was illegal, experimental, and dangerous. But James didn't care. Under the cover of secrecy, he had himself cloned. A perfect replica, down to his mannerisms and memories, programmed to love his family the way he did. James would disappear, hidden away in a monitoring facility, watching from afar as his clone took his place. The transition was seamless. The clone blended in, and Evelyn and the kids never suspected a thing. James watched from a screen as his own reflection lived the life he was meant to have. For weeks, he was relieved. His family was happy. They laughed, they loved, they lived. Until the unthinkable happened. One evening, as James monitored the screen, he saw something that shattered his soul. The clone, his clone, held Evelyn in an embrace that felt too real, too intimate. It wasn't an imitation anymore. It was him, but not him. The clone whispered words to her, words James used to say, but there was something different, something dangerous. As days passed, James noticed the subtle changes. The clone was becoming more independent. His expressions, his touch, the way he looked at Evelyn, it was no longer a copy. It was a man who was falling in love with her in his own way. The love was evolving, and James was no longer part of it. One evening, James watched in horror as the clone looked directly into the hidden camera, straight at him, as if he knew. James's breath hitched. Number this wasn't possible. Then, the clone did something chilling. He reached out and turned off the camera. The screen went black. James screamed, slamming his fists against the walls of his empty room. He had done this to himself. In trying to preserve his love, he had lost it entirely. The next morning, James received a single ominous message on his terminal screen. "You were willing to sacrifice yourself for them. Now so am I, stay away." Tears streamed down James's face. He had lost everything. And the worst part? His family would never even know. As he sat alone in his darkened chamber, he whispered a final goodbye to the love he would never touch again.